The Alexander brothers trafficking trial. I have had several requests to do another video detailing what I have seen in court so far. I have been in the courtroom for the Alexander brothers trafficking trial several different times, and I have done several different write-ups that you can find on lamag.com. But I'm going to tell you my thoughts so far. And again, we are not through this trial. The defense has not had a chance to present their case in chief, but these are my observations thus far. And I want to just reiterate a couple things for anyone who is not aware. These are three brothers, Alon, Tal, and Oren. And Alon and Oren are twins. Tal is the older brother, and all three are on trial for various different charges of sex trafficking. And again, I avoid saying that just because of the YouTube algorithm. It will just kick me off if I were to get into all of these allegations with all of the very brutal and descriptive details. But what I have observed so far, and there are many witnesses. There are outcry witnesses who, and when I say outcry, I mean these witnesses are not, they are bolstering the prosecution or the government's case, but there are not actual charges that actually pertain to some of these witnesses. But these witnesses still have experiences with the brothers that, again, will just sort of bolster the case. But it's almost like we're hearing woman after woman say the same thing pretty much, that they took a couple sips of their drink and then their body kind of became loose. They couldn't really feel it. And then they really didn't remember much. And as I said, these women, they are going into a lot of detail here. And the one thing that I have said, and you know, I've said this on a few different podcasts talking about this case, and maybe I said it on the last video, but the government has to prove that the trafficking was by force, fraud, or coercion. That's just one element that they have to prove. And so I think that so far the defense has done an okay job of proving that the brothers never forced anyone. They never frauded them by promising certain things, etc., and then not delivering on the promises. However, the coercion really is the drugs. So that's going to be completely up to the jury. And obviously, it's always up to the jury, but it's going to be up to the jury if they believe the women when these women say, yeah, you know, obviously I didn't take a drug test, whatever, but I know that I was drugged because of XYZ. Now, I think that certain witnesses that I've seen, you know, there was Bella Koval. She was, I believe, 2 weeks ago, week 2. She's a model and a musician. And she was just like, I don't drink. Like, she had a health issue. And so she couldn't drink. So she was just like, yeah, I had 2 sips of a mocktail, maybe 1 sip of wine. And then she goes into talking about how she was on this beanbag chair and she just couldn't really feel her limbs. And the next thing you know, she saw Oren allegedly on top of her, whatever. So there, I think that that's a great case for the government. And the same with another woman, I'll get into this, Lindsay Akri Jones, who testified last week. And a lot of you might know her because she is using her real name. She went public with a lawsuit. She also has a really just solid testimony with the whole I was drugged thing, meaning like she had 2 sips of this 1 glass of wine. She hadn't been drinking at all. She just arrived on their Hamptons property. You know, she takes a couple sips of this wine. She's in a hot tub. Next thing she knows, she's, you know, she can barely move. She's going in and out of consciousness, whatever. I will say one of the first witnesses, and this in no way am I saying like I don't believe her. I do believe her 100%. I believe her. This was Katie Moore, but I think she had alleged, you know, that she she was drugged and AR'd by Oren. And she had said, though, that she willingly took MDMA or Molly. And again, this is not me shaming the victim or the survivor in any way. I am just pointing out that a case like that might give the jury a little bit of pause, saying, okay, well, she did accept drugs on her own. Is this coercion? That will just give them something to think about. Again, I am not saying that because she did that this didn't happen to her, but from a jury's perspective here. So during week 2, it was also interesting because the defense, this is when the huge Epstein files they dropped, and the brothers were searchable in those files. I mean, so by the time I got around to searching them, there was only a couple of photos, I believe, of Oren and maybe Alon on a boat or something like that. It was kind of weird. But basically, because they were so searchable, the defense came in that Monday morning and basically moved for a mistrial because they were like, this is like the ultimate. Having your name with Jeffrey Epstein's, I mean, that's just a nail in the coffin. He said something like that, but obviously the judge was not about to grant them a mistrial, but they did interview every single juror separately to see if they saw anything about the files, and obviously everything was fine. There was another moment last week, which was week 3, when Alon's lawyer actually moved for a mistrial. So this was when Lindsay Akri was on the stand. She had said something about a Howard, and how this Howard said that all of the, like, she's like, and by the way, this was a different Howard. So Alon's lawyer is Howard Srebnick, and this lawyer she was talking about, I believe his name was Howard Black. I can't recall, but it was a completely different Howard, and it was a lawyer from Florida. But again, not Alon's current lawyer, both named Howard. And she's like, yeah, Howard said we were gold diggers. We were, only after their money, and a bunch of horrible things that came out of this Howard's mouth. And so Howard Srebnick's like, Your Honor, like, I just, I want to move for a mistrial because, like, the jury can't hear all this stuff. And the judge was not having it. She was just like, okay, so, you want me to, first of all, she's like, no mistrial, like, you're insane. She actually said, I don't know if this is how you do things in Florida, but it's not how we do things here. And she said, if you want me to, bring this up to the jury, and it's probably something they already forgot, so you're making this worse if you want me to bring this up. Like, she just let him have it. And he was like, okay, he sat back down. So speaking of the judge, I now have a theory, and this is totally my opinion. The judge, it is really obvious, again, in my opinion, that she does not like the defense. And I admit she has turned down both the government as well when they ask for a sidebar. But, it's when the defense cross-examines, she kind of sits back in her chair and she's like, eye roll. She tells them basically to hurry up. I mean, during week 2, Tenny Garagos actually said, Your Honor, she's like, and I think she'd been cross-examining Bella for maybe 2 hours. And she said, this charge in particular is 15 years each for the brothers. Kind of like, I'm not going to hurry up. I'm going to take my time. But again, going back to my theory is the judge, and strictly my opinion, I think the judge thinks that they are just so guilty. She is annoyed that they didn't take a plea deal, just saying, yeah, sure, we'll do 20 years each. And she has to sort of go through this trial. I think that she's so annoyed that this went to trial. That is my opinion. And that's why I'm just like, she's tough. She's a tough one. So just going back to Lindsay Akri, I found her testimony to be very credible, very hard to listen to. She said, I'll just go back. She took a couple sips of her drink, and she said she felt, her body felt weird. And then she basically said she went in and out of consciousness, and she was raped by Tall and this John Doe. And she has filed a civil suit against Tall John Doe, and actually the friend Hannah Ballout, I think that's how you pronounce it, who brought her to the Hamptons house. This was Memorial Day 2011. So, she describes also waking up the next morning and just being disoriented, and how, she was really treated like crap by Tall and John Doe. And she was ashamed. And she went into this whole thing. Like, I didn't realize at the time, like after the fact, why I went down this downward spiral and how I had such a bad year and this and that. And now it all makes sense. But the whole defense here was that she filed a civil suit, spoke to the New York Times, and spoke to the press all before speaking to the police. So the defense was just sort of able to kind of turn this around on her. And I will say, like, she did so well during the direct testimony, that to sort of see this go down with the cross, it's hard to watch, because she definitely was stumbling over her words a bit, as would anybody, of course, when it's like, and it goes back to Bella Koval, who kept saying, who's Tenny Geragos was calling her out for some of these details that she was forgetting in her testimony. Like, well, you said this, but then you told the government this, and same with Lindsay Akri. They actually said there was a very specific, horrible thing that she mentioned that was happening to her during this brutal double, or I guess you could call it a gang rape. And the defense pointed out, well, this one thing in particular, you did not share until this past Saturday. And you've met with the government, they said something like, for the past 18 months, and you shared this crazy critical detail on Saturday and never brought it up before that. And she just kind of said, well, I just, it's embarrassing for me. It's shameful, and the defense was kind of like, well, that's why you're here, like, to say all the details, whatever. So, you feel really bad. It's just not, it's not a pleasant trial to sit through, is what I'm trying to say. Because, the Constitution is the Constitution. These guys do get a defense, and their attorneys' jobs are to do what they're doing. But, these women, it's just so obvious. They have been through so much, and they are incredibly brave to get up there and share all of this, knowing what's to come, knowing they are going to be questioned and everything is going to be really, really scrutinized. So yeah, I mean, I will do my best to update everybody accordingly. Again, I think this is going to be tough for the brothers to beat. I think that a lot of, and I don't mean a lot of people, I guess, what am I trying to say? When they first hired Tenny Geragos and Mark Agnifilo, who got Diddy's trafficking charges, I don't want to say not dropped, but he was found not guilty. I think a lot of people were like, oh yeah, they have a really good chance now. This is not the Diddy case. I mean, as bad of a guy as Diddy seemed, we at least saw humanity in him. We saw, the relationship between Cassie and him, and Cassie and Jane, and we saw him act like a person. We saw him, apologize and seem loving towards them, as horrible as everything else was. But with the brothers, we don't get to see that because there was no actual relationships. We're seeing emails where they're calling women hookers and I mean, we're seeing images of people writing the word rapist on their door. I mean, this is the stuff we're seeing. We're just not seeing humanity. So it's going to be tough for them. So anyway, all right. Well, thanks for listening. This was definitely a bit of a rant on the brothers, but now you guys can sort of see where I'm at with this trial, and how, again, if you have this kind of volume of witnesses all saying the same thing, I think, again, it's going to be tough to beat. I mean, regardless if they meet all of these elements per charge, the coercion, the whatever. I mean, I think, again, the drugs and the coercion is going to be that's going to be what really gets them. So anyway, all right. I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Thank you for listening to Los Angeles Magazine's Scandals and Crime News podcast. Again, I'm Lauren Conlin, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.